That's entertainment. How talent and technology created a world.
That's a dream of romance or the scene where the villain is mean. That's entertainment. The lights on the lady in tights or the bride with the guy on the side or the ball where she gives him her all. That's entertainment. The plot can be hot, simply teeming with sex. A gay divorcee who is after her ex. It can be Oedipus Rex, where a chap kills his father and causes a lot of bother. The clerk who is thrown out of work by the boss.
Welcome.
Who is thrown
I am Dr. Sidney Soclof. I will be presenting this lecture together with two of my esteemed colleagues, Professor Nathan Koltov and Dr. Zoe Phonemes. I hope that you will learn a lot from it.
Hello. I am Professor Nathan Koltov. I am a gator from Gainesville, Florida. And I am happy to join with my colleague, Dr. Zoe Phonemes, in bringing you this interesting presentation.
Hey there. I am Dr. Zoe Phonemes. And I'm a proud Texan from the East Texas town of Tyler. I am delighted to present this informative talk together with my colleague Professor Nathan Koltov. I really hope that you will like it. And remember, don't mess with Texas.
So get comfortable and now let's get the show on the road.
In the olden days, table of contents. Dr. Sidney Soclof. Dr. Sidney22@gmail.com. 2025.
That's entertainment. The empire built by talent and technology. In the olden days before the modern era.
What do we mean by in the olden days regarding entertainment and technology? We will mean the time before phonographs, radios, and movies. Roughly the time before the 20th century, or 1900.
More precisely, we could say the time prior to Edison's invention of the phonograph in 1877. Only about 150 years ago in terms of lifetimes. We could describe it as the time of your grand or maybe great-grandparents. Just 3 or 4 generations ago. That's really not very long in terms of the entire span of human history.
The Greek and Roman theater.
The ancient Greeks included music and dance in many of their stage comedies and tragedies as early as the 5th century BC.
The Romans copied and expanded the forms and traditions of Greek theater. The 3rd century BC comedies included song and dance routines performed with full orchestration.
We will next have a short video clip of ancient Greek theater and drama.
Theater. The ancient Greeks loved going to the theater, and it's not hard to tell why. Plays were an exciting spectacle and a chance to really let your hair down. The first theater was built into the hillside on the Acropolis of Athens. The seating was tiered and shaped in a semicircle. The bowl shape of the theater meant that the sound from the stage could reach every audience member.
Echo!
There were 3 main types of play. Comedies made fun of famous people, such as celebrities and politicians. Tragedies were more serious. They were usually about heroes whose pride got the better of them.
Boo-hoo!
Satire plays were a combination of comedy and tragedy. They were very rude. Only men could be actors. They wore masks and wigs to change their appearance. Costumes were padded to make them bigger, and the faces drawn on the masks were huge and exaggerated. This made it easier for the audience at the back to see.
Hello!
There was also a chorus who sang songs and danced. Their costumes were often quite bizarre. Some plays were accompanied by music using instruments such as the lyre or avlos. The ancient Greeks held regular competitions to see who was the best playwright. Sophocles won more competitions than any other playwright and became a celebrity. Other famous playwrights included Aeschylus, Euripides, and Aristophanes. So next time you turn on the TV or watch a film, remember that it all started with the ancient Greeks and their love of theater.
We will next have a video clip of an introduction to Greek theater.
There are two main ways in which we know about ancient Greek theatre from classical Athens, where all the plays were originally produced. The first is the actual texts themselves. We're incredibly lucky, if you think about it, that we've got no fewer than 30 texts of Greek tragedies, and we've got 12 or 14 of Greek comedies. That's a very great deal. I mean, that's almost equivalent to what we've got of really good Renaissance drama.
We also have ancient sources that tell us about drama, about the funding and the politics and the organisation of theatre.
There's also the archaeological remains of theatres themselves. There's also quite a few good pots.
The ancient Greeks loved to paint theatrical scenes and scenes from their famous myths on vases, and we think they probably actually sold them at sort of touristy shops near the theatres so you could take one home with you after you've been to see the play. The actual context is the festival of Dionysus, which happens annually in around our March or April, which is when the sailing season starts and people can come from all over the Greek world. It is a massive event. It's like the Olympics plus the Oberettas mystery plays plus the Super Bowl all rolled into one.
The Greeks loved competition. In every aspect of their life they competed. And in the festival of Dionysus, each of the three tragic playwrights would be competing against one another, and each would be sponsored by a rich man who would pay for the production simply for the glory of the state. And then a jury, specially selected, would vote on what they thought was the best play. If your team won, your name and the playwright would be inscribed on the wall in the theatre and you'd be remembered forever. There was no money, it was about glory, and that's why people did it.
There were three types of drama in ancient Greece: tragedy, comedy and satyr plays.
There's theatre where the masks are quite ugly and the characters are quite low class and it's comedy, it's funny. Then there's tragedy where the characters are very beautiful usually. The masks as we see them painted on vases are exquisitely lovely to look at very often, and that is tragedy.
After each three tragedies on each day, there would also be a thing called a satyr play. A satyr was a mythical beast, half man, half goat, and these were very rude comedy plays.
Antiquity decided that there were four really classical Greek playwrights. There were three tragedians and one comic poet, Aristophanes. The three tragedians were called Aeschylus, Sophocles and Euripides. They were all Athenian citizens. They all worked to produce their great plays in the same century, the 5th century before Jesus Christ.
Traditional Greek theatre was open air and was built into the side of a hill. So the spectators sat in a semicircle up the hillside, and at the bottom of the hill was a flat area called the orchestra, which is Greek for dancing space, where the chorus would have performed, and behind that a raised stage area and some buildings for the actors.
Some modern theatres have been deliberately built in order to imitate in some respects the ancient Greek theatre. The Olivier Theatre at the National, for example, was actually modelled on Epidaurus, which is the best and earliest surviving stone theatre on a big scale in ancient Greece. This means that you have an approximately circular space which is open and extends to some extent into the audience, and you have tiered seating in a semicircular or horseshoe shape around it that rises up.
As an actor working on a stage like the Olivier, because of the wrap-around nature of the audience, it feels like you are connected more strongly to the people you're trying to communicate with and tell the story to.
Masks are another aspect of the theatre that students find puzzling and why they did it, and there are all kinds of false stories you might hear about why they did them. They wore masks because it was a religious ritual, and because that was the way it had always happened. If you've ever seen certain kinds of African dancing, which is actually related to Greek theatre in some ways, the mask is part of it. You're worshipping Dionysus. Part of worshipping Dionysus is you wear the mask of the reveller, you wear the mask of the celebrator of the theatre in that way. The mask was also really useful because it enabled you to change character, and only 3 performers performed all the speaking roles in Greek theatre, and so you come on with a different mask, a different hair and so on.
The chorus is one of the hardest aspects of Greek drama for modern audiences to relate to. It's important to realise that Greek drama grew out of a long-standing tradition of choral song and dance.
The ancient Greek chorus serves 2 fundamental roles for the whole theatre experience. The first is just fun. It's wonderfully exciting. The ancient Greeks always talked with great excitement about the moment when the chorus would start up. You had 12 incredibly well-trained, singing, dancing young men dressed up in all sorts of exotic costumes and masks, doing really excellent performances. Pretty much like you see in a West End musical, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it might be sad, but that's the sort of skill and excitement that you'd have liked. So it's not a matter of a boring interlude between the real action at all, it's actually highlights. The other thing that the chorus did, though, was provide the perspective of the community on what was happening. So we don't just get Creon and Antigone fighting about whether there's a burial, we get the citizens of Thebes, the whole city actually, represented by those 12 citizens. So Greek tragedy is fundamentally political because it's got this constant interaction between all of us and the top guys. And that is something that's very much missing from many later types of theatre.
When you get to be involved in doing a Greek play or something to do with the Greek theatre, you're going right to the very soul and beginnings of all of drama. That's a great feeling to be part of something that was and is still very, very important to traditional storytelling.
We will next have a short video clip on Greek theatre.
You can go to a play almost any time you choose. Hundreds of plays are performed almost every night of the week all across the United States. Your opportunities to see a play would have been very limited, however, had you lived in Greece around 400 to 500 BC. In ancient Greece, plays were performed only a few times a year at religious festivals honoring Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and fertility. The festivals were held to honor Dionysus, in the hope that he would bless the Greeks with many children, rich land, and abundant crops. An important part of the festival was the dramatic contest. At first there were contests for drama only, but later contests for comedy were added. The first such contest is thought to have taken place in 534 BC. The winner was Thespis, from whom we derive the term thespian, which is still used today to refer to an actor. Other famous winners of the contests were Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Euripides for drama, and Aristophanes for comedy. Of the hundreds of plays written by these famous Greek playwrights, only 40-some remain today. Among those plays, Oedipus the King by Sophocles is considered one of the finest dramas, and Lysistrata by Aristophanes is perhaps the best-known Greek comedy. Athens was the center of the Greek theater. The most important festival of the year was the Great, or City Dionysia, which was held in late March to the beginning of April in the Theater of Dionysus. This open-air theater was built much like today's large football or baseball stadiums. Since each play was performed only once, the theaters had to be large enough to hold thousands of people. Historians believe that as many as 14,000 to 17,000 people might have attended each production. So that all the audience could see, the theater was built into a hillside. The performance took place on the ground level, a circular floor called the orchestra, and the audience extended all the way to the top of the hill. Some historians believe that the audiences were made up exclusively of boys and men. Other experts believe that women and even slaves might have attended. Since there was no electricity for lighting, sound, or special effects, the plays began early in the morning and lasted until the sun began to set. Imagine the excitement in the air as people prepared to spend an entire day at the theater. Many of the Greek actors wore lightweight masks. These masks made it easier for the actors to change characters quickly. Since the first Greek actors were all men, the masks also made their portrayal of female roles more believable. Much of the action of the Greek play was song and dance by a group of young men and boys. This group was called the chorus. Thespis is credited by most historians as being the first playwright, and perhaps the first person to have stepped out from the chorus to recite the first solo lines, and thereby become the first actor. The type and style of theater performed in the United States today can be traced all the way back to these ancient Greek plays given in honor of Dionysus. What better indication of the importance of Greek influence than the fact that such key words as theater, drama, tragedy, and comedy all originated with the Greeks.
We will next have a short video clip on the ancient Greek theater.
Today, New York's Broadway is regarded as the epicenter of the theater world. A place where the stories told on stage serve as entertainment and important social commentary. But the story of theater really begins over 2,000 years ago in ancient Athens. The first Greek theaters were semicircular, open-air structures, often built into the base of mountains. They consisted of an orchestra, the main stage where the action took place, a skene, the backstage area, and the theatron, where the audience would sit. It's thought that women sometimes attended the theater, but they were never allowed to perform. Even in plays like Antigone, which has a female protagonist, men played all of the roles. The Dionysus Eleutherius is the oldest theater in Greece. It was named after Dionysus, the Greek god of the arts. Every year it held a festival where plays would be judged by a panel of spectators. Two popular types of plays were tragedies and comedies. Famous playwrights who wrote tragedies like Sophocles used Greek mythology to explore their characters' flaws and inspire the audience to think about their own behavior. Famous comedians like Aristophanes used satire and wit to poke fun at the city's political leaders. The chorus was an important part of ancient Greek plays. Up to 50 performers spoke, sung, or danced in unison and commented on the action to help the audience understand what was going on and how to feel about it. Cranes would often hoist actors into the air to simulate flight and add to the sense of drama. In a democracy like Athens, theater provided a safe space where artists and audiences could come together and talk about their society. The state even paid for citizens to attend plays, so they could learn more about the important issues they explored. Greek tragedies and comedies continue to inspire theater and other forms of entertainment today. Have you seen a play whose message stayed with you?
The best of the classical Greek theaters had remarkable acoustics for speech intelligibility, solo or unison singing, chanting, and solo musical instruments.
This is a representation of buildings around the ancient Athens Acropolis during the Roman era. besides the ancient open amphitheater of Dionysus. The roofed Odeon of Pericles is shown, along with the later period Odeon of Herodes.
The magnificent theater at Epidaurus is the best preserved of all Greek theaters. Also in the Peloponnese and now partially restored. The ancient theater of Epidaurus is considered the closest to perfect ancient Greek theater concerning acoustics and aesthetics.
This theater provided seats for some 12,000 people, and its circular orchestra is backed by a stagehouse and surrounded on three sides by a stone, hillside-supported bank of seats.
Both chorus and actors performed in the orchestra, but only the actors used the two levels of the stagehouse as well. Theater construction flourished during the Hellenistic age as never before in classical times. In no city of any size or reputation was without its theater.
We will next have a short video clip on the greatest theater.
To honor their gods, the ancient Greeks created wonders that forced them to make extraordinary technological discoveries. One such breakthrough was a theater built to honor the god Dionysius. It was the greatest theater in the Western world, with the most advanced acoustic design. Hidden in the hills at Epidaurus, about 100 miles from Athens, the 14,000-seat theater has dazzled audiences for 2,500 years. It is a feat of engineering. 55 rows of stone seats built into the hillside, with such precision that the theater has perfect acoustics. Surprisingly, the reason for siting the theater in this remote place has its origin in medicine. Next to the theater was a vast healing center, and to the ancient Greeks, theater was medicine.
One way of trying to understand the link between the healing cult and this particularly exquisite theatre is that for the ancient Greeks, music, and Greek theatre is a fundamentally musical experience, was actually used in medical therapy. The great philosopher Aristotle actually writes about how people who are distressed and psychologically disturbed can come to a great resolution of that and to a much happier state of mind by listening to certain kinds of music and watching certain kinds of performance.
At the adjacent healing center, the god of medicine, Asclepios, and his magical snakes were said to work miracles. Medical cures and remedies were inscribed on stone tablets. Shrines were built to the cult of Asclepios, and the center developed into a wealthy healing sanctuary. People came from across the empire to cure every ailment and disability. In 360 BC, the money collected from patients was used to build a vast theater. The architect, Polykleitos, had already built a roundhouse at the sanctuary, but now set about a far grander circular design. He chose a bowl-shaped site facing west so the rising sun would light up the landscape behind the stage. He dug out the round performance space before creating the huge seating area known as the gazing space. Thousands of limestone blocks cut from local quarries formed the seats. His design was for 32 rows, although 23 more were added 2 centuries later. Behind the actors was the scaena, the origin of the word scene, a 2-story stage building which was painted as a backdrop for the play. The scaena also enabled early special effects. When a play required a god to descend from the heavens, an actor was flown in on a hoist. The masked performers often played to audiences of up to 14,000 without the benefit of microphones. Polykleitos was able to create perfect acoustics. Even a coin being dropped at the center of the performance circle can be heard clearly in the back rows. The design of the theater also enhances the sound of the human voice. The secret lies in how sounds are reflected by the stone itself.
a sound is produced by somebody's mouth, it will hit a wall, that's a reflection. And what they've done in Operettas, in order to create a large quantity of short reflections, is they've broken up the surface. There is no surface which is flat. So when a sound hits a wall, it's diffused in many, many directions. It enhances the original sound by kind of stretching it a little bit longer than it already is.
And in the quest for perfection, the Greeks developed another technique to make the sound even clearer.
When somebody speaks in a theatre, you can hear resonances, and if you have an ear for it, you know which resonances are going to get in the way of the dialogue. So if you were to find something that can take those resonances out, then you're laughing. And that's exactly what they tried to do. They used a resonator, which they would tune to the frequencies that they wanted to take out and to the reflections they wanted to take out. And they would embed them in the wall.
2,500 years later, the theatre is still entrancing audiences. The place that has inspired for millennia remains one of the world's finest theatres.
The most important feature of the Roman theatre, as distinct from the Greek theatre, was the raised stage. As every seat had to have a view of the stage, the area occupied by the seating was limited to a semicircle.
As in Greek theatre, the scene building behind the stage was used both as the back scene and as the actor's dressing room. It was no longer painted in the Greek manner, but tended to have architectural decorations combined with luxurious ornamentation.
Roman theaters derive from and are part of the overall evolution of earlier Greek theaters. Indeed, much of the architectural influence on the Romans came from the Greeks, and theater structural design was no different from other buildings.
However, Roman theaters have specific differences, such as generally being built upon the foundations instead of earthenworks or a hillside, and completely enclosed on all sides.
The ancient theater was an amazing innovation on a worldwide scale, which constantly incorporated state-of-the-art technology of each era. The development of the theater itself as a structure was very impressive. From the simple platform to the addition of the ingenious pit and the use of simple wooden scenery, to the amazing stone complexes with the astounding stage, with the wonderful colonnades at the front part of the stage and the two back stages, the impressive podium and the side aisles completely harmonized in their space. From the earliest appearance of the theater, 6th century BC, a multitude of technological innovations found application or were invented to improve its function and to serve the performance, such as the staircase of death, a hidden underground passage for the advent of death, the trapdoor for the quick appearance and disappearance of persons and objects, and the deus ex machina or crane for the hovering and descending of determinate persons on the stage, precursor of the modern theatrical elevating mechanisms.
Musical instruments.
We will next have a short video clip on ancient Greek music.
Music in ancient Greece. Music was an important part of life in ancient Greece. To the ancient Greeks, music was a gift from the gods, and goddesses called muses inspired humans to create it. Where was music played? Festivals, weddings, funerals, feasts, and theater productions all included music. Buildings called audience were built next to theaters. They had excellent acoustics for indoor concerts and competitions. Who played music? Classically educated boys learned to play musical instruments from the age of 6. Girls were also allowed to play and sing. Mixed-voice choirs sang at religious festivals and public events. Being a musician could also be a full-time job. Musicians played at temples and theaters. They were also paid to play at feasts and events held by rich people and government officials. What instruments did the ancient Greeks play? There are pictures of musical instruments on ancient Greek pottery, mosaics and friezes, and descriptions of them in poetry, plays and other writings. A popular ancient Greek instrument was the lyre. It had a U-shaped frame and sheep gut strings. A more complicated version of the lyre was called the kithara. This is the root of our word guitar. Ancient Greeks also had a double-reeded wind instrument called an aulos, various types of drums and water-powered organs. What did their music sound like? No one knows exactly what ancient Greek music sounded like because it wasn't written down. From the writings of mathematicians and philosophers such as Pythagoras, Aristoxenus and Cleonidas, we know that the music of ancient Greece would have sounded very different to the music we are used to hearing.
The Middle Ages.
In the Middle Ages, traveling minstrels and roving troupes of performers offered popular songs and slapstick comedy. In the 12th and 13th centuries, there was also a tradition of religious dramas. This is a medieval pageant wagon.
The Renaissance. In the Renaissance, the Commedia dell'Arte was an Italian tradition where raucous clowns improvised their way through familiar stories. This set the course for Western stage comedy for centuries to come.
Commedia dell'Arte is a comedy of professional players. It was performed by professional troupes specialized in comedic improvisation. It started around 1520. They traveled through the countryside and often set up into something like a medieval pageant wagon. These are the parts of the Commedia dell'Arte.
The Commedia dell'Arte was influenced by the plays of Shakespeare and Molière.
We will next have a short video clip of a historical overview of Commedia dell'Arte.
Commedia dell'Arte started in Venice in the 1600s. It was a marriage of literary societies and street performers. It had one foot in the palace and the other foot in the street, and it was popular theatre. The characters represented everybody in society. It has given us the roots and the grammar of European theatre. It was the actors' theatre. Actors were authors, editors and performers of all of their material. The troupes that they belonged to were run very democratically. Everybody got paid, and it was the first time that women were seen on stage. The relationship with the audience was absolutely key. They had to understand what you were doing, and you had to listen to and understand them, and together that made successful theatre. All of the stories or scenarios were improvised from a very, very basic shopping list of entrances and exits. It meant that each actor had to really understand how a story or a performance was constructed, what the architecture was, and no scene lasted more than 3 minutes. Lazzi was the comic business. It was verbal or physical comic business that interrupted the action of a scene, took it off in another direction, and then brought it firmly back to the backbone of the story. Commedia dell'Arte has influenced every style of theatre. You can see it in Shakespeare in Midsummer Night's Dream or The Merchant of Venice. It's in Restoration, it's in melodrama. Chaplin and the Marx Brothers are direct descendants of the Commedia Zani. It's there in sitcoms, masters, servants, bosses, workers. It's there in The Lion King. In fact, Commedia is a template for all classical and modern text. It gives us a key to understanding character.
We will next have a short video clip of an example of Commedia dell'Arte. Hazards of Love. Opera was introduced in Italy, and the first record of a performed opera was in 1594.
Before 1594, between the acts of plays, there would be intermissions, or intermezzi.
The intermezzi were little bits of song, dance, and dialogue in total. The audience saw them for about 6 per show.
The intermezzi we connected with a beginning, middle, and end. People started to like to watch those more than the play. So we strung all together. And that made up the first operas.
Operettas. Comic operas had original scores and mostly romantic plot lines in addition to music. There was a comedy, and usually a happy ending. An example of comic opera is Michael Balfe's The Bohemian Girl, 1845.
The basic elements of both comic opera and operetta are 1. A story with music of a more popular nature than opera. 2. Spoken dialogue. 3. Comic interludes. And 4. A happy ending. The difference between comic opera and operetta is that operetta has a more fanciful tone than comic opera.
Examples of operettas are the Gilbert and Sullivan operettas in the late 1800s, as in The Pirates of Penzance
and the HMS Pinafore.
We will now have the song, He is an Englishman, from the Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, HMS Pinafore.
He is an Englishman, for he himself has said it, and it's greatly to his credit that he is an Englishman. That he is an Englishman. For he might have been a Rougean, a French or Turk or Prussian, or perhaps Italian, or perhaps Italian. But in spite of all temptations to belong to other nations, he remains an Englishman. He remains an Englishman. For in spite of all temptations to belong to other nations, he remains an Englishman. He remains an Englishman. For he is an Englishman, for he himself has said it, and it's greatly to his credit that he is an Englishman, that he
Vaudeville. Vaudeville was a series of acts presented by comics, singers, acrobats, and other performers. Here is an advertisement for a vaudeville show.
Vaudeville comedians Joseph Whitby and Lou Fields turned their act into a popular series of Broadway musicals and revues. Fields saw his children, Herb, Dorothy, and Joseph succeed as lyricists and librettists in musical theater and film.
A favorite vaudeville song of the period was Tarara Boom Da, dating from 1891. We will now have a short clip of the song Tarara Boom Da.
Ladies and gentlemen, the sumptuous Winnie Whoopsie Tappleton. Now I'm a lively girl, you see, the toast of high society. Strictly between you and me, as far as finest one can be. I'm not too young, I'm not too old, not too timid, not too bold. Just the type you like to hold, just the type for sport, I'm told. Ta-ra-ra, booyah, ta-ra-ra, booyah, ta-ra-ra, booyah, ta-ra-ra, booyah, ta-ra-ra, booyah, ta-ra-ra, booyah, ta-ra-ra, booyah. When I was a little girl, of a little frame and little curl, not ready for the social world, not ready for the cad or churl. You see, I'm rather older now, of a larger frame and larger brow, and all that Mum would not allow, I'm ready to show you the men all come to Sal's and stare at my legs and derriere. They say I'm beyond compare, and do I mind it? Au contraire. And so, dear fellows, if I may. You may! Really? Yes! Well, all right then. Since you've been so kind to pay. I'd so like to show you the way to do Tarara Boom Yeah. Come on, girls. Here we go, ladies. Tarara Boom Yeah. 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 Tarara Boom Yeah.
Timeline of piano, the journey to the modern piano.
The timeline of the piano, the journey to the modern piano. Around 500 BC, the hammer dulcimer became the first widely used stringed musical instrument, and was the first precursor of the piano. Its structure of paired strings was very similar to one of a piano. It was used in the Middle East, Southwest Asia, China, Greece, and Rome.
In 1400, the invention of the clavichord by the Italian musician Giovanni Spinet. The wooden form of the clavichord will later be adapted into the piano.
In 1521, Italian inventor Hieronymus Bononinsis created the first harpsichord with 4 octaves. This instrument had a very weak sound and thus was rarely used. 1700 The birth of the first instrument that we would today call a piano. This invention was made by Italian Bartolomeo Cristofori, who named this instrument the pianoforte. A low price enabled this piano to become the first instrument of its type to be widely adopted in homes of Italian nobility and royalty.
In 1766, English engineer and musician Johann Zumpe began the first large-scale manufacture of sturdy and lightweight pianos in England. In 1771, Zumpe's design of the piano was expanded by English inventor John Broadwood, who added more octaves to cover treble and bass, and pedals and strings that were much more robust and louder.
In 1801, Beethoven composed the Moonlight Sonata, one of the most popular piano compositions of all time. In 1807, the piano got a new shape of a tall box, a cabinet piano. In 1830, the first upright piano was made. This design achieved phenomenal popularity.
In 1830, pianoforte instruments finally got their name shortened into much more manageable piano. In 1840, grand pianos started being made in America. The bodies were created from a single cast iron frame. This design will be popularized by the manufacturer Steinway. In 1853, the Steinway Piano Company was founded. Regarded as one of the best piano companies of all time, it still functions to this day. In 1866, the Steinway Music Hall with 2,000 seating places was built to house the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. In 1891, Carnegie Hall was founded. It is one of the most famous music buildings in the world.
In 1920, automatic pianos became very popular. Their use became almost non-existent after the invention of the radio. In 1930, upright pianos became much smaller. In 1947, the invention of the first electric keyboard was in France. Their size and complexity prevented them from becoming widespread until the 1980s. In 1970, the musical keyboard was invented by Christopher Donison, and this model was a great learning tool. In 1980, electric keyboards started being made in all shapes and sizes. Pop and electric music popularized them. And in the 2000s, electric pianos are now found everywhere. In almost every band.
We will next have a short video clip of how Mozart sounds from the harpsichord, 18th century.
have a short video clip of Alla Turca by Mozart on the clavichord.
We will next have a short video clip of Alla Turca by Mozart on the piano. the earliest means of recording entertainment dates back to far antiquity, before the phonograph. This was the invention of writing.
Stories, poems, plays, and other thoughts could be written down in one form or another and given a permanence that could far outlast the time of the writer. Thus, we have various forms of literature available today from thousands of years ago.
Music could be recorded in a type of musical notation on paper for hundreds of years. But this still required the intervention of a skilled musician to transform it into actual music. With the invention of the player piano, also known as a pianola, the music was recorded in the form of a roll of paper with perforations in it. It can be accessed by anyone, anywhere, and at any time with a player piano.
This marks the beginning of recorded music and dates to 1842. But even before that, the idea of automatic musical devices can be traced back many centuries, and the use of pinned barrels to operate percussion mechanisms, such as striking bells in a clock, was perfected long before the invention of the piano. These devices were later extended to operate musical boxes containing a set of tuned metal teeth plucked by the player mechanism. We will next have a short video clip about player pianos.
Recommended videos.
Recommended video, a brief history of music.
Recommended video, BBC Howard Goodall's Story of Music 1 of 6. The Age of Discovery.
Recommended video, Who is Heron of Alexandria.
Recommended video, How musical instruments are classified.
Recommended video, History of Theater Ancient Greece to Modern Day. Recommended video, What is Greek Theater?
Recommended video, Greek Theatre.
Recommended video, Ancient Greek Theater and Drama.
Recommended video, The Greatest Theater.
Recommended video, Ancient Greek Music.
Recommended video, Homer Dulcimer, Evolution of the Piano, Part 1.
Recommended video, The Clavichord, Evolution of the Piano, Part 2.
Recommended video, The Harpsichord, Evolution of the Piano, Part 3.
Recommended video, Cristofori's Piano, Evolution of the Piano, Part 4.
Recommended video, Piano Lessons for Kids, The History of the Piano.
Recommended video, The History of the Piano.
Recommended video, History of the Piano. Recommended video, How does a grand piano work, Part 1. Recommended video, How does a grand piano work, Part 2.
Recommended video, How Mozart sounds on harpsichord, 18th century. Recommended video, Alla Turca by Mozart on the clavichord.
Recommended video, A Very Brief History of the Player Piano.
Recommended video, Player Pianos.
Recommended video, Pianola Playing the Entertainer.
Recommended video, Introduction to Renaissance Theater in Italy. Recommended video, Commedia dell'Arte, a historical overview.
Recommended video, Hazards of Love, Commedia dell'Arte. In the Olden Days table contents.
I'm always available to answer your questions at drsydney22@gmail.com. The end. Now we will conclude with an inspirational song, Keep Right On to the End of the Road by the great Scott from many years ago. Sir Harry Lauder.
Every road to life is a long, long road filled with joys and sorrows too. As you journey on, how your path will yearn for the things most dear to you. With wealth and love 'tis so, but onward we must go. Keep right on to the end of the road. Keep right on to the end. Though the way be long, let your heart be strong. Keep right on round the bend. Though you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode. Where all you love you've been dreaming of will be there at the end of the road. With a big stout heart to a long steep hill, we may get there with a smile. With a good kind thought and an end in view, we may cut short many a mile. So let courage every day be your guiding star always. Keep right on to the end of the road. Keep right on to the end. Though the way be long, let your heart be strong. Keep right on round the bend. Though you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode. Where all you love you've been dreaming of will be there at the end of the road.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.